radio show that officially does not exist. This is Planet X. Planet X.
And I'm so pleased to say that David Icke is on the line. David, welcome back to Planet X.
Thank you, Neil.
I've got to say thank you so much for joining us. I know you've only just got back to the Isle of Wight. It must have been a very chaotic, a very tiring weekend, but also an incredible one as well.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about a piece of history far too easily for things that don't merit it. But, you know, when you look at the journey of exposure, not just in relation to the Bilderberg group, but the wider web of conspiracy of which that is a part. I first went to a Bilderberg location in 1995, as I said at the event over the weekend. And there was nobody there. I mean, you know, Jim Tucker, the famous American guy, famous from the Bilderberg exposure point of view, who used to go long ago to these events and try to say to people, hey, there's a conspiracy going on here. These people are meeting in secret to plan changes in world society. So Jim would have been around, you know, there in that time, but I never saw him when I went. And the police on one of the days that I went when the Bilderberg group was meeting on top of a mountain, a place called Bergenstock, were stopping you even getting on the mountain road, never mind anywhere near the hotels. The hotels were right up in the distance, and you couldn't get near them. And, you know, symbolism is very powerful. It makes a statement about the energetic state of where you are. And that was an symbolic, energetic state that we were far, far, far away from bringing the Bilderberg group to public attention. But as events unfolded the last few days, first of all, there was a request to Watford Council and the police to allow us to have a fringe meeting or festival about two miles away from the Grove Hotel in a place called Castleberry Park, and they turned that down. And the police were saying, idiotically, actually, when you look at the evidence and the state of play, that oh no, they had. Intel, even police are talking about Intel now. You don't watch too many B movies, really. But the last one in Virginia only attracted like 100 people or so, and they weren't going to get any more here. Well, actually, Watford is in the centre of a massive area of population in almost every direction. So I don't know what they were thinking of, or you know, where they've been in their heads, but it was ridiculous. And so I, through my website, was trying to put pressure on for days, saying this is crazy. You're going to have a load of people coming here, and you're going to have nowhere for them to go, which would have been the situation. And then, as you know, this sequence unfolded, they realized they did have to find a place, and the only place that they could in the time they had was actually part of the grounds of the Grove. So we have another symbol, another piece of symbolism, which is now, all these years later, we are in the grounds of the Bilderberg group as opposed to at the bottom of the mountain. And that symbolism was expressed in the number of people who came. I mean, thousands of people turned up from all over the country. People coming from Newcastle, a lot from the northwest, and you know, some came from Scotland.
People came from Turkey, David, as well as Holland.
Yeah, and Croatia. There's a guy from Croatia, two people from Croatia that stopped me and talked to me. Wow. And so. It's a massive, massive statement, and I should think now, unless there was another ulterior motive for having it in Watford, whoever decided to have the Bilderberg group meeting in Watford, I mean, people will be saying, well, it wasn't me, mate. I thought it was you, because it was a PR disaster. For the first time in this whole history of uncovering this, there was massive coverage in the mainstream media and the acknowledgement that this group existed, which the mainstream media didn't want to know about before. And, you know, people who know nothing about this have now had access to information that these multiple kind of area of expertise, an area of manipulative people in Google, in governments, in corporations of many and various kinds, in the banks, in the military, in the CIA. David Petraeus, former CIA head, and the guy who ran the occupation of Afghanistan for a long time for the U.S. All these meeting under the same roof in secret. Now, of course, what we've done is make sure that they don't meet in secret anymore in terms of it's happening and this is where it's happening. But it's still in secret in terms of what goes on inside the building. But it's been a PR disaster for them. And it's been just a wonderful weekend of, again, more than symbolism. You look to those thousands of people yesterday and you saw the tide turning. You know, it wasn't the turning of the tide is coming. You saw that the tide was starting to turn. Because what that was, Neil, is AM, is the first major protest or gathering in opposition not to a government decision in the open that's passed through Parliament or is proposed to pass through Parliament, and there's a protest about it, something that's actually got to that point. This was the first major protest against the hidden hand that is behind that legislation before it gets into Parliament, and at that point where protests normally take place. So we're pulling the understanding of and the awakening of people away from the oil rags, if you like, into the engineers, although the Bilderberg group is still a strand in a massive web and nothing like the web itself. But it is a wonderful point to introduce people to the web, because you're not going so deep into it, right into the spider, where some weird and very unwonderful things go on and challenge people's perception of possibility. With the Bilderberg group, you're actually entering the web at a point where you're still dealing with here and now 5 cents people that people understand, head of Google and head of governments and Chancellor George Osborne and stuff like that. You're still dealing with that level, and so people can enter the web and understand it, and then they if they open their minds, they can go deeper and realize that the Bilderberg group is one strand and far from the most important, far from the most important in this web of global manipulation.
David, let's have a look at the thing you've just mentioned here about the mainstream media. I mean, this is really, really apt when you said quite a lot over the weekend that the genie really is out of the bottle on many levels, but particularly now because of what you've just said about the mainstream media. They cannot ignore this now. Sure, they tried to ridicule it, etc., but for example, just this week, Neil got in touch with me, sent me a text in the morning. He told me all about this article in The Sun. Now, that's really quite indicative of where you've come in the last 25 years, David, because it was The Sun, wasn't it, in the UK, that made all those comments about you, all the laughing. It's gone on and on. That's been changing so powerfully, so much. There is no going back on this now. The mainstream media, time is up. They've had it now. They don't own anything anymore, because we, the people, literally have managed to take hold of all this information technology. They were so overwhelmed, David, by the numbers of people that turned up on Saturday and Sunday, and it was phenomenal to see. It was just absolutely fantastic that was just all of it within the last few weeks.
Well, what's happening in relation to this is two things, really. One, great tracts of the population now, compared with the past, are now far more informed about the way the world really works and how the manipulation really works, and the mainstream media that's reporting that world. And as more and more people awaken to that, and this weekend will have added more to that total, the mainstream media in the minds of those people becomes more and more irrelevant, because they're simply reporting a movie instead of that which is dictating and projecting the movie. Yeah. And on the other side, the movement of events, the changes in the world that were in my books, like, in the mid-early 90s, and others have said they were coming too over the years, are now happening. And so they are stuck, the mainstream media, between And I'm sure that, if they admitted it to themselves, they're in a very bewildered state in relation to all this, because, I feel sorry for them, really, because they're bewildered little people who thought they knew about the world and are starting to realize that actually large numbers of people know far more about the world than they do. Because the problem with journalism is this combination, and when I say journalism, I mean bad journalism, is this combination of arrogance and ignorance. I've come across it for 25 years now on this side of the notebook, if you like, where they are ignorant of the world as it really is, but arrogant enough to believe that if what we're talking about was happening, they would know about it. Well, clearly they're the last people to know about it because they don't. And what they've got to come to terms with now is, in terms of their daily work, that they have been misreporting the world their entire journalistic careers. Now, obviously, no one wants to admit that to themselves, so you still try to hide it from yourself. And by doing that, you can continue to try to dismiss and ridicule what people say. It's the same as any kind of belief system or any sense of personal security of belief system or job or whatever. You take a religious belief system. When information starts to appear that challenges your religion, I mean, just take back, through the centuries when people have said, actually, the sun don't go around the earth goes around the sun, and actually this doesn't happen, and this is how it really is. Well, when their belief systems were under threat, they either killed the people in those days that were saying it, or completely dismissed and ridiculed what they were saying. And it's a defense mechanism. So there's still going to be a continuation of that, because there's nothing worse for people than to be faced with something in terms of information and you desperately want it not to be true. You're going to do anything you can to maintain the facade, to maintain the illusion that actually what is obviously true isn't true. Change the subject or pick holes in this little bit here while ignoring the fact that the picture itself is overwhelming. And so but as events go on and as people awaken and take action in relation to that awakening, like over the weekend, they are going to have to come to terms with the fact, A, they've been reporting the world in a misguided way all their careers, and two, that the guy that they've been ridiculing and abusing for the last 25 years is actually not insane, but actually sane. And that it's the world that they believe in and the world they report because they believe in it that is insane. And it's the profession that they are part of which is insane. It's going to be a big challenge for these people, because what's happening is the cutting edge is now moving so fast, and they ain't moving at all, and therefore the cutting edge is getting further and further away from them. Yes. And so what we need to do is get through things through the mainstream media where you can, but we've got to bypass it. Because now, this alternative media, which is building and building and building and building all the time, people inspire others to do it, and then they inspire others to do it, and it just kind of, expands and expands and expands. And now people in greater and greater numbers are starting to go to the alternative media first. Yeah. Because they know they're going to get much closer to the truth there than they will if they go to the mainstream. And so, the mainstream media is in real trouble, not just in, financially and the number of people that actually will read the newspapers and all the rest of it. It's in trouble in the sense that it's increasingly obvious that it's reporting a world that actually is an illusion. And more and more people know about that, so it becomes more and more irrelevant.
This is an ideal opportunity, David, for you to tell us, just on that note, exactly what the People's Voice is about.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is an energy. I've been talking about this now since my head blew off in 1990. There is an energy, and by energy I mean energy is information. Energy is awareness, and there's a new energy that's been coming in to our reality. And when I say that, of course, what I'm saying is there is a new awareness coming into our reality. And if you tune into that awareness by opening your mind rather than closing it and concreting over the door, then you access that awareness, and it becomes an inspiration and an insight that you didn't have before. And this is impacting on more and more people. And not only is it opening up people's minds, as I was told it would all those years ago. That's why my first book was called The Truth Vibrations. That was the name I gave to this energetic change, energetic awakening. But it's also bringing a change in the way, if you tune into it, in the way that this whole thing is unfolding. It's challenging the energy of suppression and control and imposition, which humanity has been stuck with for so long. Stuck's a good word, because that's what that energy is. It's stuck. The new energy, the new awareness, the truth vibrations is not stuck. It's moving. It's constantly wanting to explore new things. And so suddenly things are starting to happen. For me, we've turned the tide. We haven't turned the tide completely. We haven't even turned the tide nearly completely, but the tide is turning. And thus, things that didn't work before and were blocked before, they're now starting to manifest, because this energy is manifesting them through anyone that wants to be, a conduit or a vehicle for it. And so things are starting to move fast. For instance, I've spent the last year, up to about 2 weeks ago, and it's still a bits and bobs to do here and there in the production, but I spent the last year, when I wasn't doing the Wembley event and building up to it in October, November, I've written the biggest book I've ever written in my life, which is coming out in the autumn. It's 430,000 words, 900 illustrations, 32 pages of original color art, and it's just I woke up one morning, well, maybe not one morning, but in a short period of time, I woke up and the kaleidoscope moved. It was when I went back to Peru in April last year for my 60th birthday. When I came back from there, the kaleidoscope moved, and I saw the picture. I saw where things went. And so, it's the biggest book I've ever written, and it's also the easiest book I've ever written. There was absolutely no problem. It just went down on the page. So where I'm going with this is, I finished that. I finished that 2 weeks ago, and it's gone into production. As soon as I finished that, I go, "Ooh, yeah, there you go, a bit of a breather." No, straight into Bilderberg.
Not for you, Icke.
Straight into Bilderberg, and this fantastic weekend. And also, in that same period, in the build-up to Bilderberg, I was asked to talk to a Sunday Times journalist for what they called a major multi-page article in their Sunday magazine, and some journalist came along, and his mind was made of concrete, and he walked through the door with his story written, and he talked to me about my work, and of course, whatever you say about my books, the way they're put together, and a lot of the information in them is unique. Thus, if you're going to do a multiple-page long article on an author that writes unique books, and then you're going to walk through the door and laugh at the very idea that he would have read a single page of any of them before he came, that's what you're dealing with. And so it was an unpleasant experience, and it put me in that mode of, we're never going to get this out as it needs to get out through the mainstream media. And then, because I'm in that mode, and literally days later, a friend of mine, Mike Lambert, fantastic healer on the Isle of Wight, mate of mine, we have on the Isle of Wight a version of eBay. It's called White Bay, and you sell things on the Isle of Wight through this White Bay. He said, "Hey, there's a radio station for sale on White Bay. 500 quid.
You manifested that one.
A radio station for available, 500 quid. It's a joke. Anyway, it wasn't what was useful to us, and the guy had done a lot of good work on it. But that juxtaposition of that interview, and we're never going to get it through the mainstream media, and then immediately afterwards, hey, there's a radio station for sale on White Bay, and those two things, and I thought, that's it. We've got to bypass the mainstream media. Let's do it, and let's think big. Let's think about a television radio station. Some of it will be television. The idea is to make all of it television in the end, and some will be radio. But the information is the star anyway. And let's do it. And I've got a webmaster, a producer, and absolutely essential friend and partner in Sean, and multiple talented fellow, very great experience in television. As of he's worked with BBC connected organisations and stuff.
Look what he did with Wembley. He made Wembley happen.
Yeah,
a team of people, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, he produced he produced the Wembley event in terms of all the technical side, and Simon, who is a professional director who works for major British programs, he directed Wembley, and he's going to be involved in the People's Voice, and he is just brilliant. He's absolute genius in what he does. So we thought, okay, let's go for it. But then you think, well, can you imagine how much money it's going to cost to launch it? So I'd never heard of these crowdsourcing, websites where you can raise money through public appeal. But Sean had. He said, well, try that. So we go to one called Kickstarter, and they kicked us out. They said they saw our proposal and said it's not in line with our policy and guidelines. No, you don't want to take it on. Okay, thank you very much.
All the sphincters twitching. Oh no.
So we go to the second biggest, right? And they took us immediately, and we asked for £100,000 as and I mean this, the absolute minimum to get on air, and. But you don't want to phase people out by saying, actually, this is the figure that to do it as I really want to do it. Mm-hmm. And the staggering response was that we got the 100,000 in 6 days of the 30 we have in line with the system. Mm-hmm. So if this continues at the same rate, we are going to be able to go on air. We're really aiming for November, but certainly before the end of the year. We are going to go on air with something that can seriously challenge mainstream coverage of things. We're going to go on air with technology that can go anywhere with a reporter and stream live pictures back immediately wherever they are. We can have HD quality cameras and coverage from the start. And what I want to do is to make it a global station where you have presenters in Britain during the British day, and then you have the presenters in America during the American day and the American evening. Then you have programs that are across the junction between the two. And then, in other times, there are going to be programs from all different parts of the world. There are going to be, so we are a global station. There's going to be every subject you can think of in my books and any that the public and others come up with, we are going to cover the whole spectrum. Mm-hmm. And we're going to use it to give bands and musicians and poets and artists a platform that they wouldn't normally get. We're going to give airtime and not I want an early out in 10 seconds, make it quick, serious airtime, so we can get deeply into things for people who are experts in their various areas of expertise, but the mainstream media wouldn't touch them or even go into the subject. All this is possible, and we're getting it together bit by bit by bit. And we, I said we've got to hit the ground sprinting, never mind running, to do what I want to do. But this is what we can do, and we can challenge the domination of the mainstream media of not just information but coverage of events. So we're going to go to a point. I think about 3 months in will be where we want to be, because there'll be some trial and error. Mm-hmm. A point where people will, when there's a Boston or there's a Woolwich or whatever, that actually the People's Voice will be where people go first, because they know they're going to get the questions asked there, whereas they won't in the mainstream media. And the People's Voice just was going around my head when I was having the idea, let's go for it. I thought, what's it going to be called? And it just started going around my head. Peaceful Voice, People's Voice, the People's Voice. And it's perfect, because that's what we want to do. We want to give all these talented people out there that make these brilliant videos by their own initiative on these various subjects, and some of them get just a few hundred hits on YouTube. If we can take quality stuff like that and put it on air, and let the people be making the programs. Of course, there'll be lots of phone-ins and stuff like that, but this is not just about phone in and give us your opinion, though that's important. It's actually, you create something of quality that makes a statement worth hearing, and a relevant statement, all the rest of it, and you've got a vehicle here. We'll put it to air, and the potential is just fantastic. I've never done anything, in all the time that I've been doing this, that has got such spontaneous and immediate tidal wave of enthusiasm. We've had people from all over the world offering their help, offering to volunteer to be fixers and stuff like that.
One of the things you said, which I thought was very humble of you, actually. I'm not bigging you up, I wouldn't do that, was that you considered yourself, in fact, to be the first volunteer, and I thought that was terrific when you said that.
Yeah. We're saying, if you donate this money, we'll create the station, and the more money that you donate up to the end of the 30 days, the bigger and better and more, state of the art the station will be. And some people will be paid. Obviously, there's going to be producers and there's going to be presenters that are going to be working full time on this, and they've got to pay the rent, and so that's the side of it. But me personally, this is a non-profit making organization, in the sense that any profit it makes from advertising, and the advertising is going to go into nowhere that we don't is not in line with our values. Good. But anything in terms of what people would call profit, that is going to go straight back in the station to expand the technological possibilities, to expand the audience, to expand the range of coverage and the speed of coverage and all that stuff. And I am going to. Well, I am. I mean, as I say, I thought, okay, Bilderberg. Yeah, after Bilderberg, I'm going to have a rest. I'm just going to get me breath back. And now I'm going to be, here, there, and everywhere for the rest of the year and into next year with the People's Voice. And I'm doing it for nothing. Right up to the launch, I will not take a penny. After the launch, I will not take a penny, because this is just. Something that absolutely can massively make a difference. All this, how can we get this information out? Imagine a station with 24 hours of airtime, where apart from the law of libel, and I don't mind that, because the absolutely last thing I want to do is to say anything about anyone that's not true. But apart from the law of libel, there will be no censorship. No censorship. Your presenters can have who they like. They can ask them what they like. They can cover the subjects they like, and there's no one looking over their shoulders saying you can't do that and you can't say that. And we've had interest from mainstream journalists who want to be part of this, because they are sick and tired of the shackles that they have to work with every day.
Absolutely.
And we've got this brilliant mainstream journalist, Sonia Poulton, who I've had my eye on since the first time that People's Voice came into my mind. I thought she'd be perfect for it. I approached her, and she jumped at it, and she's going to be brilliant. She's going to be one of the major daytime presenters. She writes for things like the Sunday Express. She's on This Morning quite a lot. Yeah. She's on the Jeremy Vine show on the BBC quite a lot. She's a mainstream journalist, but she's not got a mainstream mind.
Good. David, what in your? Let's go into your head, which is probably not a good idea, but let's go into your head.
No, he's had his tea. He's eaten now.
He's okay now. Paint a picture of what it's kind of going to be like. Is it going to be like a news format, a rolling news? Is it going to be like a magazine show, documentaries, or a mixture of all of that?
All of that. If we see anyone in a shirt and tie, you're on the wrong channel, right? We don't want shirt and ties, nooses around people's necks, inverted nooses. No, thank you very much. We don't need that stuff. What we want is a format in which the presenters express their own personality. And what's vital in the major presenters that are doing, yes, there will be a kind of rolling news situation at parts of the day in Britain and parts of the day in America. And we'll be any time that a news story breaks, then we'll cut in and we'll follow it immediately if it's important enough. But within say a daily 2-3 hour show that someone will do, there will be the rolling news stuff. Yeah. But there will be music. There will be videos, there will be interviews, there will be phone-ins. What I said to one of the potential presenters today, who was at Bilderberg, is that, you know, we want a situation where you've got the basis of where your program's going that day, but you don't exactly know where it's going. And I want it to take its own life. So, you know, it's 10 minutes before you're going to run out of what to do next. You're then discussing, okay, what comes after that? Well, we got this good video here, or hey, we could talk to so-and-so, and so it becomes something you can't really, you can say, yes, this person's going to be on, and that person's going to be on, but in totality, there's not a running order in the sense that you find in the mainstream media. We just go where the music takes. Yeah. And if for instance, that people come on the phone, and they're interested in a particular subject that day, that morning, then we can actually move the show in that direction, because it's so flexible. Brilliant. And this is why the presenters have to be very, very informed about their subject, and also I want the presenters to be able to not just say this is the news, this is what's happening, but all to be able to say, because they understand the subject. And actually, this is what Cameron's saying, but this is what Obama's saying today, but what he's really saying is this because of this. Yes. And we're breaking the news down, and then people can come on the line and say, well, I agree with you on that, or I don't, and this is why I don't, or this is why I do, and this interaction goes on. And you know, we're going to have music. We're going to have, you know, I'm hoping Frankie Boyle will come on. You know, he's just the guy we kind of need for the week with Frankie Boyle would just be brilliant. You know,
Mr. Brand as well, maybe.
Russell's been brilliant. Russell Brand has promoted this brilliantly, and so as Frankie, to get onto the site and donate, and let's get as much as we can so we can make it as big as we can. Oh yeah, someone like Russell Brand, I mean, you'd snap their end off, because he has that mind which fits the station, the people's voice. He's looking at life in a different way. Yeah. But I can just imagine, you know, all this controversy about Frankie Boyle, where he can't even have his piece on what's in our Red Nose Day and Comic Relief. He can't even get that to air because he's censored. Well, imagine saying to Frankie, here's an hour, the week with Frankie Boyle. Comment on what you think about the week's events, and there's no censorship.
The ratings will go through the roof.
Just don't libel anybody. Yeah. But apart from that, it's your airtime. You say what you like. This is the whole thing about the people's voice. And it's about choice, because then people say, well, I don't want to hear this or want to hear that. Well, don't listen then.
Switch off.
Come in when it's finished. But I'm not censoring things because it upsets you if you listen. Don't listen. Go to another show later on when it's over. This is where we want to go with this, and we can make such an impact, because when you free people of censorship, you're taking the cork out the bottle. You're allowing all the stuff that they want to express to be expressed. Now, people might not agree with it. There'll be lots of things that will be said on the airtime that people won't agree with, and some people will, and all the rest of it. But the fact is, it's being said, and anyone that you know, has something said about them or their belief, they can come on and say what they like about it, and instead of, you know, political correctness in terms of censorship, we will go to the other stage, which is we'll have political uncorrectness, and we'll have people being able to give their opinion on that political uncorrectness.
Which is absolutely perfect, because there's Mark McGowan, the artist taxi driver, who we post every now and again up on davidicke.com headlines, who literally talks into the video camera on his dashboard, and he speaks exactly how he wants to speak, and says probably what the majority of people are really, really thinking. What a fantastic delivery that guy does.
Yeah, but the thing is that that's exactly what we want in the people's voice.
Yeah, that's what
now, if someone can you know, decides to do that, and they do it in an entertaining way, that you know, will be entertaining to people, because it has to be, if it's not the information itself grabs you, in terms of a big news story, you know, you're there watching anyway what's going on, but you know, you have to entertain people as well to hold their attention long enough for them to see to get to the end and you know, listen to it out. So there's ways of doing it. You don't just put anything to air, but things that justify it. That they're the sort of things we want.
Yeah.
It's the people's voice, and this is why there's going to be no David Icke show. I'm going to be obviously flitting which I love doing, flitting from subject to subject and coming up all over the place on the station. But it's not. There won't be a David Icke show. If the next 3 hours it's David Icke, because that's not me. I don't want to do that. But also because this is about giving people an opportunity to hear what they need to hear without censorship, and to say what they want to say without censorship, and the power of that combination could be devastating, because we want to put people into press conferences, accredited people, just like the mainstream journalists, put them into news conferences and ask these people the questions the mainstream journalists wouldn't ask. And we therefore need people doing that who are highly, highly informed, who are not abusive. That's the last thing we want. Yeah. And are not aggressive. We don't want that, but will not take no for an answer. Sonia Porton's like that. I mean, she's she doesn't take prisoners if people are trying to avoid the subject, which is what we want. So yes, put all this together. It's really could be. It could change so much and give a voice to so many people and cover so many subjects that would never be covered in the mainstream media. Certainly not in the way we are. When people come on and say, this is my opinion in terms of something far out, we're not going to be a mainstream media organization that says, oh, don't be crazy, next caller, right? Because all the people on the station, to a larger or lesser extent, from the perspective of normality, in other words, insanity, masquerading as normality, they are not going to be normal people. They're going to be open-minded people, and therefore anything will go.
I've got to ask you, David, I mean, with your background in the media, a lot of people would say, you should have done this years ago, but I'm guessing that the time wasn't right. Now the technology has caught up. There is that backlash. There is the awakening. There's certainly a backlash I've noticed since we started doing Planet X towards the likes of the BBC with the whole Savilgate, with the misinformation. I've never heard before people, and these are just generally, people off the streets, your average man and woman, your taxi drivers, saying, I really don't know whether I want to pay my license fee anymore. Right. And you never heard that years ago.
Yeah, exactly. There was that, famous saying, about an idea whose time has come. And the response to the launch of the appeal for the people's voice has been so amazing, clear, and the speed. 5 weeks ago, we were saying, let's do it. 5 weeks ago, and look where we are. There are people we're going to be talking to very, very soon that if it comes off will be a massive step forward to make this happen in the kind of way that I want it to happen. And it's all happening so fast because the energy is shifting, and this is an expression of that energy shifting. Everything on an energetic level it expresses itself in multiple ways. So on one level, it's people individually awakening to seeing the world and themselves in a different way. But there are other expressions of that, and the awakening. This people's voice is part of that awakening because it is an operation that will aid and speed the awakening by providing the information for people that will open their minds to awaken. And so it's an expression of that energy, and because that energy is moving and it's impacting itself on more and more people, as we saw, at the Bilderberg event and in many other ways now. Then this energy is, and this people's voice. It's basically surfboarding a tidal wave that's coming. It's not a tidal wave yet, but it's going to be, and therefore. Everything's falling into place in the most amazing way. And it is now that it had to happen, going back to your question. If I'd have done this earlier, I almost certainly would not have got the money to do it. And the interest wouldn't have been there. It's like, it's a good analogy, really. When a surfboarder goes out into the waves, and swims out there. He waits and he picks the wave. He doesn't get on any old wave. And when the right wave comes along, he's on it, and it takes him. Well, this has happened in such a synchronistic way that the people's voice has just got on the surfboard. It's just got on the wave, and where it goes could be amazing. All that that we need is public support, and we'll do the work. And my God, I can't tell you what the amount of work there is to do between now and November. It is quite daunting. But I said to Sean today, and some other people were sitting around a table, going through all this, and I said to him, this idea is so crazy. This time scale that we're trying to get on air in is so crazy and ridiculous. It's bound to happen, right? It's bound to happen because people talk about people being naivety. Well, sometimes you need a form of naivety
just
because
to do it, make it happen.
Just go for it because. People that think they're streetwise in all this and all the rest of it, they can wait for the wave, and they're waiting for such a perfect situation to appear, and that wave never comes, and then suddenly the tide's turned and it's gone. Yeah. So it feels right to me. The way it's unfolding is supporting that, and we'll see where it goes. But my New Year's resolution, I've just changed it. I never had one before. I don't really change it. I've got one now, and it's giving up sleep. That's what I'm going to do. I've decided.
We'll remind you of that.
No more sleep.
To kind of sum up for me what I heard you say yesterday, with exactly what you have just told us about, and all the listeners. But briefly, first of all, I don't think I've ever seen you in 20 years I've ever known you speak like that, deliver to an audience like that. And if any person came to this information, David, completely blind, didn't know anything about the subject matter, you managed to somehow put into 60 minutes, or it was 58 minutes, what you would normally put into an 11-hour presentation. And if anybody came to that information knew from start to finish, they would see exactly how insane this world is, how everything is upside down. But apart, David, from all of that, and to sum up what you've just said, what really impacted for me was when you said to everybody that was there and everybody that was listening live stream, think about this. And this is the equation, David. This is what you've just summed it up, really. That there are approximately 140 people in that building over there at the Grove Hotel compared to 7 billion people on this planet.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly, for me, that really summed it up. But I have never, ever, ever heard or seen you speak like that. It was phenomenal, mate.
Well, what we're doing is we're putting the whole thing in HD on the site this evening. Almost any time now. In the next hour, at the latest, it's what Sean told me. I tell you what, yesterday, when I stood up and started speaking, it was like I was in I probably was actually. It was like I was in another dimension. I was looking into this one, and I used the word surreal about 6 times last night in different things. I kept saying that was surreal, and then people who hadn't heard me say that came in and said that was surreal. It was like the word of the night, because what happens? This is so fascinating and so explains so much, is that most of the time, because of the conspiracy, people are operating in a certain frequency band, and it's a frequency band that's absolutely welded to the 5 senses. But when you expand your mind, and in particular when you open your heart, which is the real connection to the highest level of awareness, you move into another level of energy, i.e. information, i.e. awareness, and you are bringing that awareness through into this reality. And this is why, people who go into expanded levels of consciousness, and I've been loads of interviews in Watford today of a spiritual, if you like, nature of reality area of exploration, and people who have had these big kind of expanded experiences. They tell you about them, near-death experiences. They tell you about them, and what they're doing is telling you the same thing. And they've entered this expanded level of awareness, and therefore what they get, what they understand, is the same. Some of them are almost using the same words to describe what happened to them. And that's what happens. And when you do that, you literally you've moved your point of attention into another dimension, and your body's in this dimension, but your point of attention, which is actually communicating, is not. And this is why I've done a lot of research recently. I did a series of synchronistic things into people like Leonardo da Vinci and Giordano and Bruno, who followed da Vinci in Italy about 3 decades later. So we're talking, in Da Vinci's case, 500 years ago. And this guy was an absolute genius, beyond genius. People remember him as painting the Mona Lisa, but actually when you look into the background, this guy was a genius. He was inventing things, and it's all in his notebooks. He's drawn it, and he's put the technical detail in words that were only made to happen hundreds and hundreds of years later. I mean, people like Sikorsky, when they were developing helicopters, were actually inspired by his drawings and technical details about that form of flight, because Da Vinci was obsessed with flying. He built the first armored vehicle, in a way, to protect people in war from attack, like what we would call today the tank. That was there. He created the first what we call a hang glider, because he was obsessed with flight. And I saw a documentary recently in which 500 years later they got engineers to build things from his exact design and see if they'd work. And they built them, and they all worked perfectly, except that he'd put one flaw into every single one where he'd done something absolutely the wrong way around. And he did it for a reason. There was no copyright in those days. So if anyone got hold of his notebooks, because he twisted one essential part of it upside down, they'd never make it work, only him. The reason I'm saying this is the same with Giordano Bruno, who was burned at the stake in 1600 for the crime of actually saying there are multiple worlds out there, multiple stars, suns, and planets going around them, and supporting the idea that the Earth goes around the sun. It's amazing what you get put to death for. Anyway, and he was well. They say, like Da Vinci, this is where I'm going, ahead of their time. They're centuries ahead of their time. No, they weren't. They were beyond time. Yeah, that's where they were, because what I'm saying, where you expand your awareness beyond this reality. What you do when you do that is you go beyond time, which is only a decoded information field of this reality, of this illusion. Time's an illusion. I saw a great line, graffiti on a wall. It says that there's no such thing as time, only clocks, and that's absolutely right. But our perception of time, you go beyond time, and when you go into this land or this realm beyond time, you can access that level of awareness and insight that is not available, certainly at the time of Da Vinci and Bruno, within this reality, and you bring it from the unseen, from the other levels of awareness into this level of awareness. And people say, at first they say you're mad or you're dangerous, but then with the passage of what we call time, they say, God, that man was light years, centuries ahead of his time. But he wasn't. He just went into this realm, which gave him that. So back in, we see history, the Stone Age and the Middle Age and the Victorian Age and the New Stone Age, as I call it today. We see all that, and we see this sequence of events, what we call history. But that's just a figment of the movie in this reality. At the time of the Stone Age, if you could, which was, I say, nothing like as primitive as it's painted, but if you could expand your consciousness into this beyond time realm, you could get insights in that period, as we call it, that Da Vinci got, that Bruno got, and people get today. It's always there. It's somebody said to me many times over the years, "When's the cavalry coming?" but if the cavalry came in the sense that it came into our reality it would no longer be the cavalry. It would be the sheep. It's not that the cavalry's coming. We are the cavalry. But to make the impact and make the change that we need to do, we have to access, if you like, the level of the cavalry, which is this beyond time realm of awareness. And to do that, you've got to open your mind, open your heart. All preconceived idea, brackets belief, have to go. And your inspiration, your insight, and evidence and information has to be your guide on where you go and what you think, rather than preconceived idea and programmed perceptions of reality that the system is absolutely set up to do for an entire lifetime in this world.
So true.
Absolutely. Oh, fascinating stuff. I could listen to you talk all night. Unfortunately, we've run out of time.
All right, mate.
This wouldn't happen on the People's Voice, of course.
No.
Go on all night, 24/7.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just go and put your feet up and chill and relax, but you don't do that, do you, David?
No, I don't. I mean, again, my life...
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you. This man, when he gets back to me, the email starts at 5:30 a.m. in the morning.
No sleep.
And he is still going, if I email him at 11:15, 11:30, midnight, and he still replies. And I know you won't say it, David, I'm going to say it. This guy works a minimum of at least 15 hours a day, 24/7. So please, people, bear that in mind. All of those people who kind of make snidey comments, knob off, basically. You've got no idea how hard this guy works.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my life has just fallen perfectly. For the last 7 years, I've lived alone. And it means that I have lovely grandkids and lovely family, and I spend time with them here and there. When we have family gatherings and do things, but they understand that my greatest contribution to their lives is making sure that they live in a world of freedom and justice and fairness, and that's what I want to give to my grandchildren more than anything else, and everyone else's grandchildren, by the way, and so. It's left me completely free to do nothing but, apart from seeing my family, to focus on this. And clearly that's what I need to do, because every time, they say every time there's a vacuum, it fills itself. Well, I don't think every time there's a vacuum, a bloody tidal wave comes in. Well, that's what's kind of happening now. But it's brilliant. I am. You knew me.
1993.
You knew me when the ridicule was still at its peak. You knew me when no one wanted to know.
I witnessed people coming up to you in the street, families, not just men or women on their own. I mean, the most horrendous things, laughing in your face.
Yeah.
Hey, listen,
it was just horrendous. People haven't got a clue of really what you went through.
Yeah.
I know you tell us, but I saw it. I saw a portion of it. I saw a little of what your family went through. Your family were crucified by it. This is the thing. People know a little bit, but, they really didn't see the most appalling things that you were up against. But yes, in those days, mate, there was no internet. Oh, I'm going to get me wooden clogs out now, aren't I? There was no mobile phone. Seriously, we still, we had no money. The faxes, when they came along, were a bit exciting, but there really wasn't. Truly.
Exactly.
There was nothing.
David, I of course, I think Ames has told you the story. I went to see at the Neptune in Liverpool all those years ago.
Which I am put on, of course.
Yeah, and I bought the tickets, and people were saying to me, "Are you mad?
Yeah.
What are you doing going to that?" And it's been nice for me to see your journey over the 25 years plus. And when we started doing Planet X on the mainstream, and you came on and did the show for us, it was nice for me to hear people just coming up to me and saying, "Hey, he makes sense. That David Icke guy."
Oh, that's terrific.
It's great, and again off the back of the Sun piece,
Yeah, all you've got to do, it's what's driven me on. Well, what's driven me on is I knew that the basis and the themes of what I was saying were true, and thus I knew where the world was going, and that's where it's continued to go, and that concentrate the mind when you know what the end is designed to be. My goal is not to be proved right. Oh yeah, he said this was happening, and it's happening. I want to create a situation where people become so aware of what's going on, they become so engaged with what's needed to do to stop it, that it stops happening. That's what I do it for, not to be proved right, but to stop it happening. We're in a perfect storm here, and storm's probably not the word, but you get my gist.
Yeah.
We've got the awakening of the people. We've got the technology, because there's so much technology coming in now, which is of the surveillance, control, variety, but there's technology coming in now too that makes the ability to communicate information by the people to the people and bypass the mainstream and the corporate media. That's there now, and at the same time, you've got this energetic transformation that's teasing people open all the time and making things happen that wouldn't have happened before, in terms of, the people's voice and stuff like that. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful time on one side. Very challenging because of what's being planned. But over the next 10 years, we're going to look the dragon. Well, we already are. We almost did it at Bilderberg. We're going to look the dragon in the eye, and the dragon's going to blink.
Mate, I'll come back to it. 140 people inside that hotel at the Bilderberg group meeting, and reminding us there are 7 billion people on this planet. Thank you, David.
The power is with us.
Yep, absolutely. We just got to remember that, and the game is over.
Yeah.
Cheers, David.
Listen, good luck with everything, especially the people's voice. I've never heard you so excited. You can literally hear the buzz in your voice.
Right.
Like this. It's your new little
and you
baby.
should be exhausted.
Yeah.
Well, I can see the potential. I can see its part in pushing over the House of Cards. I really can.
We are so excited.
Well, we're going to get you back on in the near future for an update, for a brief update.
Yep.
But David, thank you so much just after that long journey back home.
No problem.
For coming and joining us and our listeners on Planet X.
Thanks both. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, Icke.
X marks the spot. This is Planet X.
Good stuff. Great talking to Icke there. I think he was on fire there, wasn't he? As we said in the interview there, a real buzz in his voice about the people's voice.
And what a pro, for God's sakes. The guy's been going, I mean, even before he was doing his own work and his own research, the way he worked in mainstream media on television, they don't make him like that anymore. These people just read off auto cues. He could do 10-second delays. He could do delays for VT, speak over things. They don't make him like that anymore.
It's been also a pretty full-on weekend, because he doesn't often come over to the mainland, and he's been there, and he's just been interviewed by everybody. Everybody wanted a piece of him, and then he's had to get the ferry all the way back to the Isle of Wight, and he's still going.
He's incredible. The guy is phenomenal, and I'm not kidding about the work ethic of that man. I've worked around some very high achievers, but I have never in my life known anybody like that guy.
And as we mentioned towards the end of the interview, he is going to be back on closer to the launch, which I'm very excited about. The whole idea, the whole concept of the people's voice. Can't wait. Listen, I'm just going to say apologies because apparently we've had a few gremlins in the works. It's our first show back, if you like, from a new studio. And so the show went out a little bit later than advertised, but hopefully you've enjoyed it all the same. We're going to look ahead to next week's show, and we're going to actually be recording this on the Tuesday. So this Tuesday, we're going to be speaking to Graham Hancock, and the show will go out on the following Sunday. So if you'd like to get a question in for Graham, then you need to either contact us via the Facebook, email us, or do it on the forum, and you can get all the details at planetxlive.co.uk. But try and get your questions in for Graham before Tuesday. We're also going to be joined by 2 new Planet experts who've both been on the show as guests, Liz Dasty and also Jeff Moran. Yeah,
Liz Dasty, the incredible astrologer, 30 years in that subject, eats, sleeps, lives and breathes it. Same with Jeff Moran, a wonderful guy, knows his subject, sound therapist, resonance, frequency, you name it, creme de la creme in terms of their subject matter. Wonderful people as well. So we're going to be talking to Graham. Now, he's got a lot to talk about, obviously. There's all the alternative histories that he's done with the likes of Fingerprints of the Gods. I think I'm right in saying he's actually working on a sequel to that. One of the main things he wants to cover is his new novel, War God. The second of his the second of his fiction of a three books he's written. This is the second one.
Okay, and I really want to get into the whole ayahuasca. Now, he's been dabbling with ayahuasca for some years now, and I've been following his sort of ayahuasca diaries that he was talking about, or writing about, when he last paid a visit to South America. And his last sort of experimentation with ayahuasca took on a bit of a dark theme.
It kicked his ass, Neil. It absolutely kicked his ass.
Kicked his ass.
What he said.
So I'm quite intrigued to talk to him about that.
The way it is like is when you ascend up the ascension scale is where I got to a point where I got really scared, as I was like, hang on, my ego is my dark side. And that's where you get to. So I imagine the amount of ayahuasca journeys he's been doing, that he must be up to some sort of personal confrontation within his own mind. And
he was talking about, that he met Mother Earth, but he also met this very dark energy, this very dark entity, and as AM says, it really did...
put him through the ringer, in his words.
Absolutely,
yeah. What an incredible experience he must have had.
So that's Graham Hancock on the show next week. He's also going to be in Liverpool, so I know this is a worldwide show, but if you are in Liverpool, we've got an evening with Graham Hancock on Wednesday, the 19th of June. He's going to be at Waterstones Liverpool 1, and we've got a couple of tickets to give away as well. So listen out next Sunday, and Graham will set a question, and you can win those tickets to see Graham Hancock and an evening with Mr. Hancock here in Liverpool on the 19th of June. But it's Graham Hancock on the show next week. All I've got to do is say apologies again for the lateness of the show. Just a few technical glitches, but we'll be all sorted for next week. And thank you to our special guest. Thanks to Stretchy, who's pulled pretty much all of his air out tonight trying to sort it. Thanks to John O'Brien as well. We'll catch you soon.
Honour.
And thank you to AMs as well.
Thanks, mate.
And we'll see you next week on Planet X.
Conspiracies to cover-ups. This is Planet X. The radio show that officially does not exist. This is Planet X. Planet X.
And I'm so pleased to say that David Icke is on the line. David, welcome back to Planet X.
Thank you, Neil.
I've got to say thank you so much for joining us. I know you've only just got back to the Isle of Wight. It must have been a very chaotic, a very tiring weekend, but also an incredible one as well.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about a piece of history far too easily for things that don't merit it. But when you look at the journey of exposure, not just in relation to the Bilderberg group, but the wider web of conspiracy of which that is a part. I first went to a Bilderberg location in 1995, as I said at the event over the weekend. And there was nobody there. I mean, Jim Tucker, the famous American guy, famous from the Bilderberg exposure point of view, used to go long ago to these events and try to say to people, hey, there's a conspiracy going on here. These people are meeting in secret to plan changes in world society. So Jim would have been around, there in that time, but I never saw him when I went. And the police on one of the days that I went when the Bilderberg group was meeting on top of a mountain, a place called Bergenstock, were stopping you even getting on the mountain road, never mind anywhere near the hotels. The hotels were right up in the distance. You're going to have a load of people coming here, and you're going to have nowhere for them to go, which would have been the situation. And then, as this sequence unfolded, they realized they did have to find a place, and the only place that they could in the time they had was actually part of the grounds of the Grove. So we have another symbol, another piece of symbolism, which is now, all these years later, we are in the grounds of the Bilderberg Group, as opposed to at the bottom of the mountain. And that symbolism was expressed in the number of people who came. I mean, thousands of people turned up from all over the country. People coming from Newcastle, a lot from the northwest, and some came from Scotland.
People came from Turkey, David, as well as Holland.
Yeah, and Croatia. There's a guy from Croatia, two people from Croatia that stopped me and talked to me, and so. It's a massive, massive statement, and I should think now, unless there was another ulterior motive for having it in Watford, whoever decided to have the Bilderberg Group meeting in Watford, I mean, people will be saying, "Well, it wasn't me, mate. I thought it were you," because it was a PR disaster. For the first time in this whole history of uncovering this, there was massive coverage in the mainstream media and the acknowledgement that this group existed, which the mainstream media didn't want to know about before. And, people who know nothing about this have now had access to information that these multiple kind of area of expertise and area of manipulative people in Google, in governments, in corporations of many and various kinds, in the banks, in the military, in the CIA. David Petraeus, former CIA head, and the guy who ran the occupation of Afghanistan for a long time for the US. All these meeting under the same roof in secret. Now, of course, what we've done is make sure that they don't meet in secret anymore in terms of it's happening and this is where it's happening. But it's still in secret in terms of what goes on inside the building. But it's been a PR disaster for them. And it's been just a wonderful weekend of, again, more than symbolism. You look to those thousands of people yesterday and you saw the tide turning. It wasn't the turning of the tide is coming. You saw that the tide was starting to turn. Because what that was, Neil, is and AM is the first major protest or gathering in opposition, not to a government decision in the open that's passed through Parliament or is proposed to pass through Parliament, and there's a protest about it, something that's actually got to that point. This was the first major protest against the hidden hand that is behind that legislation before it gets into Parliament, and at that point where protests normally take place. So we're pulling the understanding of and the awakening of people away from the oil rags, if you like, into the engineers, although the Bilderberg Group is still a strand in a massive web and nothing like the web itself. But it is a wonderful point to introduce people to the web, because you're not going so deep into it, right into the spider, where some weird and very unwonderful things go on and challenge people's perception of possibility. With the Bilderberg Group, you're actually entering the web at a point where you're still dealing with here and now 5 cents people that people understand, head of Google and head of governments and Chancellor George Osborne and stuff like that. You're still dealing with that level, and so people can enter the web and understand it, and then they if they open their minds, they can go deeper and realize that the Bilderberg Group is one strand and far from the most important, far from the most important in this web of and you couldn't get near them. And symbolism is very powerful. It makes a statement about the energetic state of where you are, and that was an symbolic, energetic state that we were far away from bringing the Bilderberg Group to public attention. But as events unfolded the last few days, first of all, there was a a request to Watford Council and the police to allow us to have a fringe meeting or festival about two miles away from the Grove Hotel in a place called Castleberry Park, and they turned that down. And the police were saying, idiotically, actually, when you look at the evidence and the state of play, that they had intel. Even police are talking about intel now. You don't watch too many B movies, really. But the last one in Virginia only attracted like 100 people or so, and they weren't going to get any more here. Well, actually, Watford is in the centre of a massive area of population in almost every direction. So I don't know what they were thinking of, or where they'd been in their heads, but it was ridiculous. And so I, through my website, was trying to put pressure on for days, saying this is crazy.